It's time now for the award-winning #1 local talk show in Northeast Pennsylvania, The Sam Lesante Show. Now here's your host, Sam Lesante.
Well, welcome everyone to the Sam Lesante Show. Remember, my friends, 24/7, ssptv.com, our YouTube channel, and we're all over the place. Now, I have a fun show today, my friends, and just sit back and enjoy the show. We're going to bring you back the memory lane up to the present. My guest today is Shadoe Steel. Now, you could remember him as Rusty Fender. Shadoe Steel, he's been around for a while, 45 years. I'm going on 40 years. He beat me by 5 years. But remember the Saturday Night Live at the Oldies? Great times, okay? And Shadoe, it's so nice to see you again.
It's good to see you, Sam. Thanks for having me. 40 years, congratulations on yours. In this business, 4 years commemorates a confetti party. 40 years is just unthinkable in this changing day and age, Sam.
Well, I feel good because, you know, you're the older guy and I'm the younger guy. I like that. You see, it makes...
Absolutely. I knew you would.
It feels good. You know, your career, you know, I mean, you have such a fabulous career and done so many things. But before we get into, you know, you started what? I mean, your educational background, what was it?
I graduated back from the University of Scranton with a degree, a Bachelor of Science degree in electrical engineering. 2 years. They wanted me to go to the University of Michigan in Adrian back at the time. The University of Scranton still does not have a 4-year engineering program. So I taught at Wilkes. In hindsight, maybe I should have gone to Wilkes. But my grades were good enough to get me to Duke University in Durham, North Carolina. So I have a Bachelor of Science in Electrical Engineering from the University of Scranton and a Master's in Aerospace Engineering and Rocket Dynamics Propulsion Systems Engineering from Duke University. And always did radio. Well, this is my 55th year in radio as a hobby. But for 28 years, I worked in New York City in charge of the space program. So myself and my team of people controlled the actual communication satellites, which bring anything from HBO to convenient mart credit card numbers down to Earth. So we controlled a fleet of 19 communication satellites, and I worked at CBS on 57th Street for 8 years, went to 30 Rockefeller Plaza for NBC for 8 years, then put this fledgling network on the air called MSNBC. It's called MS Now. They just changed the call letters this past week, as a matter of fact. MSNBC in Secaucus, New Jersey. And then worked for 4 more years at CNBC in Inglewood Cliffs in engineering. Was recruited because I had already been working as Rusty Fender and started the first traffic program from Hazleton Regional Airport. Our helicopter was based here. And we go way back to this town, Hazleton, for a lot of different reasons. So we started that back in 1990, and because they wanted me to start this traffic program, they knew the way, then I knew how big city radio did it. So because I was working in New York City at the time for almost 20 years, they recruited me to start a traffic program in this area. Now, there was traffic before, but not regularly scheduled. So we started with one station, 98.5 KRZ. Then they bought WILK. They bought The Mountain. They took another station, WGBI-FM, turned it into Froggy 101. Then I was on the Allentown, East and Bethlehem market on WLEV, Cat Country 96, Oldies 99.9, The Hawk. It turned into this massive network, and then we went on television. I was on every morning with the morning crew on WBRE, WYOU, and then Fox 56. So at the same time, they wanted me to start this because I was already a part-time employee for 5 years at that time. So it benefited them to get me because I knew the way big city radio did it. You know, 1010 wins, WCBS FM, you know, 5 to 15 minutes at the Lincoln Tunnel, try the Holland Tunnel, the Verrazano Narrows Bridge, backed up 7 miles, looking good on the BQE. So they knew I could do this, and we were extremely successful at that. But it benefited them, Sam, because they didn't have to post this position externally or internally. What they did was they promoted a part-time guy doing Saturday Night Live with the Oldies, Shadoe Steel, into this ancillary full-time position. So it worked around. I signed on initially for a 2-year deal, stayed for 27 years.
You mentioned about traffic, okay, and I used to listen to you, okay, Rusty Fender. How did you get the information? I mean, how did you know what was going here and there and 309 this? How do you get all that information?
People will laugh, but in those days we flew from Hazleton to Clark Summit and beyond, from Mount Pocono out to Williamsport, wherever we could pick up the signal, because I'm listening off the air on headphones to all these stations. And we had a set time. So, you know, we started at 5 o'clock in the morning. So 5:03 was KRZ, 5:06 was WILK, 5:09 was The Mountain, 5:12. We had to be on time, or you would miss it, or you'd get the wrong report. And I'd say, so-and-so, Rusty Fender and Froggy 101 were actually on WILK. So it was very, very difficult. It was a learning curve at first. But we started with one station, which made it very easy for us, and then we worked our way into just this network of stations. But PennDOT at the time used to fax us with information where they'll be working. Now it's down to email. And I work for PennDOT now, engineering as well as NASA at the Goddard Flight Center in Greenbelt, Maryland. Still have 2 jobs. So again, the Saturday Night Live with the Oldies thing was born out of this hobby, which turned into a career, which a lot of things are. But we would get a fax, saying that there was going to be guide rail, work today on Interstate 80 near the 81 junction in Drums in the Cunningham area. So we'd fly over and check it out. Sometimes we'd get this and it would rain, they wouldn't work. Other times they'd be there. So we confirmed it, but in those days it was kind of rudimentary. We're talking 35 years ago. So, we got a lot of information, and then we saw a lot of information. You fly in the dark in the morning, especially in the wintertime, it doesn't get light until 7 o'clock in the morning. You can see the red and blue lights flashing. Looks like an accident, looks like an overturned tractor trailer. We flew there. It's down to a science now. With the detector loops and all the information when your car passes over, they can tell the speed of your vehicle, from a remote location. Now it looks primitive. It's like black and white TV back then. But now, on your smartphone, you can see if a car is stopped on the Pennsylvania Turnpike in Pittsburgh, the way we're all linked digitally now on all these networks. It's incredible. PA 511. It's like you can go on there and get the whole state. You can see a road closed in Erie, Pennsylvania, a lane closed in Harrisburg on Interstate 83 in York. It's unbelievable, Sam. The technology changes every hour.
And the Saturday Night Live at the Oldies, okay? There's no question, Shadoe, that you have a passion for what you're doing.
I do.
Okay? As I do what I'm doing.
You do.
Okay. So, how did you start with the Saturday Night Live at the Oldies? And I know many, many thousands of people used to just look forward to that.
Absolutely. Good question. On October 23rd, 1980, it was a Thursday. You do any big promotion or any big giveaway always on a Thursday in radio and TV, because that's when the diaries, the rating starts. The ratings in television and radio have inherently always started on a Thursday. They run Thursday through Wednesday. So you want to do, if you're giving away a car or you're giving away a case of soda, you want to do it on a Thursday. So this out-of-town company from New England came in, bought KRZ. A very interesting side note on this as well, Sam. But they came in, and the date was October 23rd, the coldest Thursday night I ever remember in history. Actually, the Wednesday night, was the night before. So even though I was not at KRZ from the start, I kind of was, because across the street from the temporary studios of KRZ at 60 South Franklin Street, I was the master control night engineer on duty at WBRE at 62 South Franklin, right across the street. So WBRE, AM and FM, they were news and information stations. They were bought by this conglomerate out of New England, and they were going to make the first FM rock and roll top 40 stations in this area. FM, as we all know, Sammy, has been around since the 50s. In the 50s and 60s, FM was primarily talk and AM was primarily music. Then in the 80s, it flipped. So this was the only station in the area going to go top 40, and they're going to do it right. 120 days, commercial free, on this brand new station. At the time, there was no digital. It was 98.5, WKRZ FM. Later on, it became 98.5 when we all went digital. So that night, I signed off WBRE, AM and FM at 2 a.m., And literally, Jim Rising, not only the person who was the original program director of KRZ, but also the person was the first person to do Saturday Night Live at the Oldies 2 nights after. Don't forget, we're on a Thursday. Saturday night is coming up 2 days later, so the first edition of Saturday Night Live at the Oldies done by Jim Rising, and then later, for many years, by Jerry Padden, who's now a huge, big deal. He's an operations manager at all the Cumulus stations in Allentown and also Wilkes-Barre Scranton. I took over for him. So we literally disconnected all the equipment and walked over with pails from Lowe's and the Home Depot across the street to this temporary building and hooked up this studio overnight so it would be on the air at 6 a.m. the next morning, which was the morning of the 23rd, and they got it going. My job was not to hook up, or I had nothing to do with KRZ. I was the night guy at WBRE. So when we were all done, it was our equipment that they bought. So I had to be there to oversee the dismantling of all the, the transmitter equipment and all the audio equipment things that this new company bought to make this brand new station 98.5 WKRZ. So I was there from the start, but not really from the start. And then about 6 years later, then fate would come around and they created this Saturday night opening for me. And then I took the job ever since.
How did you approach that? I mean, because the music, okay, and the whole thing. How did you put it all together?
That's the deal. I had a good following in radio. In radio these days, if you have a 10 share, is phenomenal.
Oh, yes.
A 10 share, as you well know, Sam.
Yep.
Meaning for the viewers out there, 10 of every 100 radios on is tuned to that station. That's incredible. 10 out of 100. Yes. Back in the days before me, I can't take credit for this, but back in the days before me and during me, they had a 73 share on a Saturday night. They had awards from institutions and associations and broadcasting we never even knew existed. A 73 share. Wow. 73 out of every 100 radios.
That's phenomenal.
It is phenomenal. Yeah. So when I picked up the ball, I had to make sure that I kind of continued on. And you can never maintain that because there's more stations that give competition. Sure. Yeah. And for the most part, out of all those years I did it, out of the almost 40 years that I did it, we were number one in the 7 p.m. to midnight time slot, probably 35 of those 40 years, which is unbelievable. We were beaten at times by Rock 107, who did things such as rock blocks, where they play 10 in a row by Led Zeppelin or 10 in a row by Bachman Turner Overdrive. That wasn't our style. My style was top 40, the way you listened to it as a kid on your AM radio, on your standard manual transmission AM radio. And that's the songs that we picked for that. And then we were beaten at times by Magic 93 because they just played their regular soft rock format. So we were beaten at times as well, but consistently. Out of the 4 ratings books a year, spring, summer, winter, and fall, they correspond with the seasons, we were number one nationwide for about 35 or more of those 40 years. So I wanted to continue on with the music, and I wanted to do something different than the typical oldie stations did at that time. The typical oldie station, anywhere you go, has the same 50 to 100 songs you hear every single week. And I know the first thing they teach you in radio, and I've been doing it for 55 years, is familiarity is our friend. Yes. But there's a caveat with that. When you hear American Pie and I Will Survive and Brown Eyed Girl every single week, it's a tune-out.
Yeah.
So we take a lot of heat for playing a lot of the non-standard traditional songs like The Run Joey Runs and The Wreck of the Edmund Fitzgerald, all massive hits, but songs that you don't really hear in regular rotation on the regular stations. So in radio, they have what they call the oh wow factor. When you hear a song, you think, wow, I haven't heard that in 20 years.
Yeah.
But it was a huge hit when it came out. It just doesn't get played a lot. So I had to keep, and then we started integrating over 3,000 interviews in 40 years with everybody from Michael Jackson to Barbra Streisand to Billy Joel, right on down.
I want to ask you about that, okay? I mean, going back to, because I remember, listening to and it was such a great thing because you had you brought back memories, etc. I want to go for a break, but anyway, I'm talking to Shadoe Steel. Remember his rusty Fender. 45 years, my friends, he's been doing this, and when we come back, some behind-the-scenes type of things, and when he had these various guests on. I mean, it's interesting. It's a pleasure for me because I've interviewed thousands myself. We'll be back right after this. Well, welcome back to the Sam Lesante Show, folks. Remember, 247SSPTV.com. Comcast 190 for my friends in Pottsville every night, 7 to 11. And in the Mountaintop Wilkes-Barre area, channel 92 every Saturday and Sunday from 7 to 11 p.m. And, of course, you can watch us anytime, anywhere in the world on our SSPTV.com. My email, sam@ssptv.com, 570-455-7267. Hey, my friends, I'm interviewing Shadoe Steel, Rusty Fender, bringing back some great memories. Been around for 45 years. I love it because he's the old guy here today. We were talking about the thousands of people that we've interviewed throughout the time, and I know you get the same thing I get. Say, Sammy, who do you think who is your best interview? Well, there were so many great interviews. It's hard to say that, but you have some interesting people here, memorable guests. Okay, Henry Winkler. Let's talk about Henry. How did that happen?
Henry Winkler was great. It was at the advent of Happy Days coming out on DVD.
Okay.
Robert Conrad, same deal. A childhood friend of mine from the Wild Wild West. His show was coming out on CBS Paramount DVD. Actually, Barbara and I actually went and had dinner with him in Thousand Oaks, became a good friend of Bob's until the day he died in California. There's only so many times you can interview some of these musical guests. And we were through the gamut, several times. So the musical guests were great, and a lot of pop culture guests were great as well. I remember the record of the Edmund Fitzgerald was a huge record, still is. It's kind of like my theme song, as people say. On the 25th anniversary, so it sank November 10th, 1975. On the 25th anniversary, we wanted to do a special show about the sinking of the wreck of the Edmund Fitzgerald. And back in those days, Sam, you had to call directory assistance to get numbers. Remember seeing online, it was just barely online, barely had the internet at that time. But he had a brother, the captain of the Edmund Fitzgerald, which was an ore boat that sank in Lake Superior, in Lake Michigan. Had a brother, and I figured that getting the brother, if he were still alive, would be a very interesting, addition to the story of the wreck of the Edmund Fitzgerald. And finally, after about 100 tries, finally found him in directory assistance. Not only that, but I petitioned the United States Coast Guard that night for the first time ever. We had the original transcriptions of the audio Mayday, the SOS calls from the Edmund Fitzgerald saying that the ship was going down in Lake Michigan, and integrated everything with it. But the people on the list are not the interesting ones. It's always the ones you don't think of. And here's one. I've had Michael Jackson, as you well know, Billy Joel, Barbra Streisand, Billy Joel 4 times.
Tom Jones.
Tom Jones, who did, Barry Manilow, who was our first interview in 25 years. Barry is a very private guy. And right now he's on his last farewell tour. I think his 800th farewell tour. Greatest guy in the world. But one of the most memorable guests was the guy that did the big record back in 1978, Al Stewart, who did The Year of the Cat and Time Passages. Remember that? Time Passages and The Year of the Cat. And big song. But he turned the whole interview around in the first couple of minutes by saying that he's one of the largest collectors of rare wine in the United States and had a collection of over 16,000 bottles of rare wine at his Pacific Coast home in an entire room which is climate controlled. And as you well know, Sam, being a master interviewer yourself, when the guest turns the interview the way he wants it to go, you don't correct him. You let it go. And we talked, and I know nothing. I don't even drink alcohol. I know nothing about wine except Cabernet. I know how to pronounce that. So we talked all about these rare wines that he bids on at auction. And the whole interview was about wine, one of the most interesting interviews ever, because most people are into fine wine. I'm not. But again, when the guest wants to talk about wine, you talk about wine, Sam.
You learn a lot.
You do learn a lot.
It's funny because, as people say, well, you interview people, and you pray for the person to talk, okay? And sometimes say, well, it's sad, let the person talk. I said, I would love to have the person talk,
We talked about this. The one-word answer people are the worst ones. Oh. And Billy Joel is the worst person for that, even though he was on 4 times. Yeah. I try to ask a question that I know the answer to already. Yeah. I wanted him to talk about his album, The Nylon Curtain, back in 1982, because an elderly man at one of his concerts in Allentown, Pennsylvania, stood up and said, why don't you ever do a song? You're from New York, you're 100 miles away. Why don't you ever do a song on the Rust Belt of Allentown East and Bethlehem? And Billy said, you know what? That's really interesting. I've never heard that before. I'm going to. He came out with the song Allentown about that. And I wanted him to recant the entire story of how an elderly man at the concert swayed the whole album to go with Allentown. So I built this whole thing up about you're legendary in the Lehigh Valley. He goes, yeah, it's a good song.
Let's talk about what you're doing now.
Yes.
Okay. What you're,
yes.
you know, you're broadcasting every week. Okay.
Yes.
And because I could talk to you for 4 days. Let's talk about what are you doing right now?
Right now, the Saturday Night Live with the Oldies.
It's still on.
So still on. We went back on the air Memorial Day weekend. A colleague of mine, Joey Kramer Amato, who does a show on 105 The River, big station, does a show called Decades with Joey Kramer. Last 18 years, I believe. We've been in contact. I've been a guest on his show many, many times. And he said, we got to get Saturday Night Live with the Oldies back on the air again. I said, I really don't have, a heck of a lot of time to do this weekly commitment. And I don't want to do 1 week and then take, weeks off like a lot of people do. So the second biggest, and we're going back to what I mentioned before, Oldies, the second biggest internet provider in the country with 30 stations and growing. They contacted Joe to see if he wanted to put on another station on their roster of stations. They have everything from talk stations to country stations, urban contemporary disco stations, rap stations, hip-hop stations. So he proposed this brand new station. It went on the air last Christmas called The Cube, as in Rubik's Cube, 80s, 90s, and the 2000s music. And he wanted to sign me as the first program on there, Saturday Night Live with the Oldies, the original time slot, 7 to midnight Eastern time, around the world. And this company bought it. So when he went on the air during Christmas, of course, you start with absolutely no ratings. Nobody knows what the Cube is. So he took it literally in 6 months from a 0 rating to the number 2 of the 30 stations in their network. It's the number 2 station.
How do you do that?
You do it by good programming. You do it by doing something that nobody else does, and you have to be in the right place at the right time, and that you can't plan.
So if I want to listen to you, how do I do that?
Again, I'm not really convinced about internet radio, but it's here to stay. You'll download the Oldies app, or we're on every network, on every app. iTunes is iHeartRadio is the biggest provider in the world of media. iHeart.com, Oldies.com, Odyssey.com, which is coincidentally
and your show comes up.
Correct, but it's live. It's not a podcast. So you will have to listen on 7 to midnight Saturdays, and then they rebroadcast it because it's so successful Wednesdays, 7 to midnight. It's on twice a week, same show. Just download the app. The app is, I've never seen an app load in 3 seconds. It's the easiest thing to do. And the whole station is on. The station is all the time is 80s, 90s, and early 2000s music. And then Saturday Night Live with the Oldies comes on 7 to midnight. But it is not a podcast. It is done live at that time, Sam.
Okay, so when I think of oldies,
yes.
Of course, I'm giving my age away, but I mean, like the big secret. I'm thinking of the 50s.
Right.
I'm thinking of, early 60s, etc. What are considered the oldies today?
Well, on a real oldie station, the oldies now are probably 2005 to 2020.
Wow.
Yes, because you're programming for the new 18 to 25-year-old crowd. So to be honest with you, and I always use this, Madonna is too old for the oldie show anymore. But we do, my format, with few exceptions, are 1967 to 1985. So our core audience is the 70s. They're all the one-hit wonders on the private labels that you have not heard until the old days of WARM on AM radio. We take all those playlists and we do those songs, which are highly successful. And here, as was explained to me, that if you listened in the 1950s to 50s music, you would have to have been at least 10 to 20 years old. So theoretically, you would be dead by now if you wanted to hear the 50s and the 60s music. And it's true. You have to program for a younger audience. Back when I did Saturday Night Live with the Oldies, this is in the 90s. Now get this, in the 90s, we had no calls for either Elvis or the Beatles, two of the biggest groups and artists in the history of music, no calls. Everybody wanted to hear more contemporary things from the 80s, you know, all the one-hit wonders from the 80s, like Madonna, Tiffany, Debbie Gibson and that. It just keeps, the oldies keep getting newer, Sam.
Yeah, it's amazing. You know, Shadoe, I could talk to you for so many hours, but in closing, we got a minute left. What would you like to tell our audience?
Well, I want to thank, first of all, you for having me on the program and recognizing.
My
and
pleasure.
Again, congratulations on 40 years. I hope I'm here 40 years from now. I hope we're both here 40 years from now.
Yeah.
But I want to thank the listeners, because without the listeners, it would just be, without the listeners, these would be records you're playing in your own living room.
Yeah.
While you're having coffee.
Exactly.
Exactly. So without the listeners and the success of bringing this back, I was very reticent to bring this back because a lot of the technology has changed, and that was just a slight problem. You want to leave on top, like the Andy Griffith Show. You want to go out as number one. You don't want to be dragged off the air.
Yeah.
So I didn't want to bring it back with this internet radio. It's the way to go, and it seems to be working. So we're very, very thankful. We're very, very privileged, and I'm thankful to be here, Sam.
Listen, I wish you the best of health.
You as well, Sam.
Which is the most important thing, and keep your program going.
You
and
look wonderful. I'll see you in 40 years.
Okay, thank you. Shadoe Steel, my friends. These are the kind of shows I love to do, okay? But tune them in and enjoy yourself. We'll see you next time.